Hi everyone, welcome to my channel and to this time-lapse version of a lovely chocolate Labrador fresh out of the water in soft pastel. I hope that you enjoy this speedy version here. There will be a full-length tutorial series from this over on my Patreon if you'd like to learn more. I'll add the link in the description. But please do subscribe here on YouTube if you enjoy it. This piece is quite big at 18 inches by 14 inches, and for this one I decided to use the newer Canson velvet paper. You can see the lovely buttery yellowy tone of paper, and I thought that would be perfect as a warm undertone for this very warm looking photo reference. Now, I've painted many chocolate Labradors in the past, and each one could have an entirely different palette depending on the light that's hitting the dog. And in this one, you can see that in the photo reference, the lighting looks quite unusual. Everything's really glowing. So I have to take that into account with each colour that I add to my palette. I really liked the background though. It's extremely out of focus, so it's pretty nondescript. Therefore, I know that this kind of out of focus effect will really enhance the detail on the dog later on. Now, I'm a big fan of backgrounds in portraits. I think they can tell a lot of the story in a portrait, and sometimes with a pet portrait, it's the whole moment or the day, the place that you were with them that's part of the memory. And I really do like to capture more than just the animal itself. I really like to capture the scene as well. But in this case, there's not really much to capture. So my aim in using the background as it is in the reference is really just to tie in the type of lighting that's hitting the dog. So those warmer colours that I've used in the background, you're going to see those pop up a lot on the highlight colours on the dog. So everything's got to tie together in the painting colour-wise so that I can accurately describe the lighting. Because if the light's hitting the background, it's also hitting the dog and they'll react in a similar way. So a mountain of colours in this one. I just kept picking up colours. So as always, I do choose out a little palette of colours to get me started. I like to have a good idea of my palette in front of me before I start. If you're interested in how I go about doing that, check out some of my palette videos here on YouTube. I've made quite a few videos now about choosing different types of palettes. And there's a really set way that I go about that. There's a little formula that I kind of use when I'm choosing out my colours. But as proved in this painting, it doesn't always get me exactly the colours that I'm going to need. And that's usually the case when the lighting is a little bit tricky, something perhaps that I haven't really painted before. And the nature of colour theory being that colour is relative. Sometimes colours behave very differently when you put them next to different types of colour groups. And sometimes it's hard to choose the whole palette accurately before you actually start to paint and see how those colours are sitting together. So a lot of the time in this piece, I was picking up colours initially for my palette that were a little bit too light in tonal value. So I had a range of lighter tones. I had a lighter blue. I had some lighter red earth or those coral colours that you see. And you can see me just test out a little bit of it there on the top of the ear. The problem is if I go too bright with my highlights, it's gonna wash out all of the other colours. It's going to make the dog lose its vibrance. And there's one thing I wanted this portrait to be, and that was vibrant. And to really try and capture that almost exaggerated warm, it looks like a really warm sunset, could be sunrise, but it's an intense type of light in the photo reference. And of course, the eyes are perhaps a little bit small on the dog because she's looking into the direct sunlight here. She's really looking into the brightness. And we get some lovely bright highlights on the eyes. But in general, they're pretty small within the whole painting, so there's only so much detail I can add there. But a lot of my time is spent what feels like sculpting her face, because I'm really looking at the bigger shapes on her face, the light and shade areas. So a range of dark colours going into the coat. I've got pure black here. I'm using a harder black stick. The one I'm using is a new pastel stick, but I'm aware that these are nowadays quite tricky to get as individuals. So any black hard stick will do the job. And then I'm using a dark Terry Ludwig eggplant colour, and it's like a really, really dark purple, but I often use it as black because it just has a bit more life to it than pure black. So the very darkest areas I'm coming in with the black first, mostly just to tone it right down to darkness. And then throughout those areas I'm coming in with the dark Terry Ludwig just to liven up the black a little bit. Then dark browns, purples, a whole range of colours within the dark areas. So a lot of colour in this portrait. And as I said, I've painted many chocolate Labradors before, and each one tends to have a reasonably different palette to the next. There will be common colours within most of the chocolate Labradors I've painted. For example, Unison BE6, which is a really dark, rich brown, tends to pop up in a lot of my animal portraits. This is one of the colours in my Unison Animal collection, and it really is one of my most used brown tones. So there are browns within the mix here, and they will appear in a lot of my pet portraits. But then it's all the extra coral oranges, bits of vibrant red and red earth, really strong blues, because of course we've got the blue sky above the dog, and that's clearly what's reflecting on the top of the dog's head especially. You can see the blue really strongly here. Also on the top of the nose. So when I'm looking for colours within the photo reference, I really try to logic with myself. Why am I seeing a hint of blue here, or where is that coming from? And it almost helps me to see that colour in other places, because I think, well, if it's on top of the head and on top of the ears because they're facing the sky, which other surfaces on the dog could be facing the sky and catching some of that blue colour? So the reflected colours in any painting are something that always fascinates me. I love to try and figure out where those colours are coming from in the photo reference, even if I can't see the source of the colour. Like in this case, we don't actually get any of the blue sky in the portrait, but we certainly get a sense of it just from the reflected colours on the dog. So I'm now working on down the body. Face pretty much done. I'll go back and add whiskers at the end and a few more little water droplets, because of course Cara is wet from just being in the water, and she's got lots of little droplets and glistening bits of water on her coat. Not so much on her face, just little droplets here and there. But then the front of her chest here is pretty well defined because we get the sense that the fur here is wet. And we've also got a big area of dark shadow there. And I really like to create dark shadows where I see them in the reference. It's one of the things I think that makes the work look convincingly 3D in the end. And it's that contrast, so the contrast between light and shade. I like my darks to be really dark and rich. And in this painting, it was a real lesson in self-control, in using darker highlight colours, so sticking more within the mid-tone colours and saving those brightest little bits of highlight for all of the little glistening water droplets towards the end. So definitely a challenging piece. I had to think pretty hard about the colours as I was working on this one. But I really love a challenge, especially when it comes to colour, because I'm still learning about colour as I go. Just having a little bit of colour theory knowledge gets you a long, long way. And if you'd like to learn more about colour theory and how to apply it in your own work, more importantly, do check out that playlist here on my YouTube channel. I've got a whole playlist devoted to colour theory. But I hope that you've enjoyed seeing this come together. Do check out the full tutorial series coming soon over on Patreon if you'd like to learn more or see some of this in real time. And please, as always, do remember to subscribe here on YouTube. But thanks very much for watching, and until next time, happy pasteling.